Germany is a country of bombs. Every day new ordnance with deadly poison gas is discovered.
Sometimes gases emerge from the ground, and then we put on a mask.
More than 5,000 bombs from the Second World War are recovered and dismantled in an elaborate process every year. In addition to that, there are hundreds of thousands of poison gas shells that were sunk off the German coast. He was there. The rotting shells on the seafloor often rob him of his sleep.
I just thought, if that comes up, it'll be a disaster.
He knows many forgotten locations, such as here in Brandenburg. Professor Johannes Preuss wants to find out what dangers people and the environment still face from the legacy of war. Many of the locations are remote. Ruins of a weapons factory turn up. From 1935 onwards, Hitler's Reich started building up its armory, here too. Every day, shells were filled with 12 tons of explosives here. There are many such locations in Germany, but the problems are pushed aside because they involve poison and dangers, and sorting them out would cost several billion euros.
Explosives were handled here on a large scale, a mix of TNT and ammonium nitrate. TNT is carcinogenic, and it alters our DNA.
After the war, everything was simply left. Professor Preuss has brought along a quick chemical test that detects the explosive TNT. Dark red indicates danger. That means the problem substances are still in the ground and have been leaching into the groundwater for decades.
The pipes in this building are contaminated, and this contamination spreads to the entire sewer system. We can prove the existence of explosive crusts in the pipes.
Toxins such as TNT, picric acid and hydrogen cyanide lie hidden. TNT is both very poisonous and highly carcinogenic. After the war, this was a Soviet exclusion zone, but for the past 25 years, this area has been freely accessible. During the Second World War, there was a munitions site here where shells were filled with explosives like on these pictures. Around 1,500 people worked here, including prisoners of war and forced laborers. The explosive residues were washed down into the sewer when the halls were cleaned. There were also many accidents and explosions when they were released into environment.
The substances on the ground here have reached the groundwater, and if the groundwater is used, it could affect people. That's why we have to do enhanced testing for these substances, not just the routine test performed on drinking water.
When they're out in the woods, toxins and dangers are quickly forgotten. That's not the case in towns and cities. The alarm has been raised. A bomb has been found in Osnabrück. 8,000 people have to leave their homes. 2 unexploded bombs from the Second World War have been discovered not so very far from the city center. The THW, a civil protection organization, the fire department and the police go from house to house. Everyone within a 1-kilometer radius has to leave. Have you taken valuables with you, just in case something happens?
I have everything on my laptop. I don't think our house will blow up. It'll be there when we get back, but better safe than sorry. You never know.
The people are told to leave their house immediately. Those who don't want to go voluntarily are escorted off the premises. One of the 2 bombs lies beneath the Dobrik family's garage. They've known about it for 2 weeks. Since then, they've not just been scared of an explosion, but of the cost. If the bomb is still live, the family will have to pay for the demolition of the garage and the recovery, even though they only bought the house a few years ago.
What does it mean for us? It says very clearly that if something unexploded is found, you have to come up with the money yourself. But you have all your domestic expenses. Then you've got your mortgage and the 3 children. So what does this mean for us financially?
The bomb is finally being removed today. It's an emergency situation. Within 3 hours, the neighborhood is transformed into a ghost town. People who don't know where to go are looked after by volunteers in a school. Eyewitnesses, like Heinrich Lücke, remember the air raids of 1944.
There was this droning of the bombs and the dust in the air after the explosion. That was dreadful for us children.
The British and Americans flew more than 70 air raids over Osnabrück alone. An estimated 677,000 bombs rained down on the town. Around 1 in 10 of those bombs didn't explode. Many are still in the ground today. These detonators are still live. They're particularly dangerous. 5,500 unexploded bombs and shells are found in Germany every year. The Lower Saxony State Bomb Disposal Unit arrives with a small digger to get to the second bomb. It weighs 500 kilograms and is probably still live.
If that bomb goes off and it's half a ton, then we can say goodbye to the house, I'm certain about that. At some point, it will go off. The probability is very high. We have 1 or 2 spontaneous detonations in Germany every year. These bombs contain a preset detonator, and they're lethal.
Again and again, even bomb disposal experts die on the job. A video of an accident in Euskirchen 3 years ago reveals just how dangerous these bombs are. After a digger struck an unexploded bomb by chance, there was a powerful explosion. Several homes were badly damaged, and the man operating the digger was dead immediately.
I have a lot of respect, and sometimes you think they've been there for 70 years already. Just think what might have happened. But when it comes to the point, the only feeling you've got is that you have a job to do. And that's the right thing to feel.
Removing the detonator requires great sensitivity. When the bomb disposal experts get to work, everyone else has to leave the area. But how did they even know that there was an unexploded bomb here, 5 meters under the surface? Our search for answers takes us to Scotland. The National Collection of Aerial Photography in Edinburgh is probably the world's largest aerial photographic archive. The German geographer Andreas Buchholz has been working here for 8 years. The archive includes 10 million aerial photographs from the Second World War, as prints, negatives, and in digital format. At least 7 British reconnaissance flights went to Osnabrück, taking hundreds of pictures. These photographs are very sought after now. Every day there are requests from Germany.
I get the feeling they're on the increase because the relevant authorities are learning that we're discovering new images almost every day. Only a small percentage is currently available online. It's growing slowly, and it'll take a long time until everything from the archives has been processed. That's why we discover new treasures almost every day.
Thanks to the latest technology, more and more unexploded bombs are being discovered in Germany. The huge negatives from the aerial cameras are gradually being processed by a high-resolution scanner. This allows viewers to zoom into objects just 50 centimeters in size, just like with Google Maps. They can view them in 3D too. Even back then, the aerial images were taken three-dimensionally.
In order to achieve the stereo effect, you have to put these pictures over each other, which is quite easy to do. Now we can process this area in 3D.
This way, the experts can even determine how deep a bomb crater is. Black dots indicate potential objects, but despite the technology, many dangerous areas are still undiscovered. A forest in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Professor Johannes Preuss is heading for an almost forgotten legacy of the First World War. Leftover ammunition was dismantled and blown up here in the 1920s.
I think this was the storage area for the explosion site.
There aren't any buildings here anymore. The Treaty of Versailles required Germany to destroy all poison gas and shells.
It was quite a large facility and quite significant. More than 3.7 million rounds were dismantled here over the years, including chemical warfare agents.
Workmen built a branch line from the Hamburg to Berlin railway that led into a very remote forest. They dismantled or exploded millions of shells by hand. 100 years later, the remains of these munitions are still lying around in the forest, including live fuses from hand grenades. The geologist believes that the edge of this explosion site is still contaminated.
You can see these red layers. That's incineration residue.
Johannes Preuss can use the quick test to prove the presence of the carcinogenic explosive TNT.
These substances will leach into the groundwater for another 100 years if nothing is done about them. They've been here for 80 years and they're still there, contrary to expectation. I used to hear that time would heal these wounds, but it takes a long time. These substances are very potent.
The Federal Environment Agency asked him to come here 15 years ago. He produced an in-depth report and warned that the ground was contaminated. Nothing has happened since. The deputy mayor knows nothing of the report with the recommendations for action. The local authority is unconcerned.
In my view, there aren't any hidden dangers here. Nothing serious has ever been found. The municipality owns this track. It's been cleared and nothing serious was found.
Johannes Preuss worries that the chemicals and toxins are still entering the groundwater. But here too, the waterworks don't routinely test for chemical agents. The only thing that was done was that a few signs were put up for walkers.
This is an unsatisfactory state of affairs. We know there's a problem, but nobody wants to tackle it. This isn't an isolated incident. It's just one example of more than 50 such cases.
There are 4,336 locations in Germany suspected of being contaminated with old ordnance. The most contaminated of them all is on Lüneburg Heath. The German army is now responsible for its safety. Michael Brendemühl is heading to the location of a former chemical weapons factory and a test site where a freight train with many thousands of poison gas shells exploded in 1919. 900 hectares are contaminated. The threat to the environment is great, particularly for the region's groundwater.
There are arsenic compounds and the decomposition substances of chemical agents.
They urgently have to be removed. That's why a groundwater treatment plant has been built. Filters remove 500 kilograms of arsenic from the water every year. It's invisible, but it's enough to kill 5 million people. Right next door is the heavily contaminated former test site for poison gases. Military search patrols are constantly in the contaminated area, looking for live chemical weapons and shells.
We search every day of the year, in all weathers. And depending on where we're looking, we find a couple of rounds a day. But on some days, we find up to 20 rounds.
They found something. He measures if poison is leaking.
It could contain a number of chemical agents, such as phosgene, tabun or sarin, but also a variety of explosives.
The Army's bomb disposal unit is specially trained and equipped to recover chemical weapons. The shell is placed in a mobile X-ray machine on location.
Looking at its construction, it's very narrow, and the liquid level would indicate a mustard gas.
Mustard gas is a dangerous poison that causes burns on the skin or leads to death by suffocation. Recovering the shell is taking place under the highest safety precautions. It'll later be burned in special furnaces.
The chemical agents from the two world wars are still as potent as the day they came from the factory, because they've been enclosed in the munitions, and so they're just as dangerous.
The acute danger has been removed in Osnabrück. Senior bomb disposal expert Clemens Stolte has recovered the two devices. Bomb number 1 weighs 500 kilos and has a fuse that's stuck.
It's good. Sometimes you have to get lucky too.
The high explosive bomb slid into the ground and remained undamaged. No TNT leached into the soil. The second bomb, however, broke up on impact. For 70 years, the fragments lay under the Dobrik family garage. They were no longer live.
The bomb burst open, but didn't detonate. There are explosives everywhere. They have to be gathered up, and the soil has to be replaced.
Jürgen Wietheup has good news for the family. Mrs. Dobrik is visibly relieved. After all, this could have cost a pretty penny. He won't bill the family for anything. Since the bomb wasn't live anymore, the local and state authorities will bear all the costs, including for the garage and the soil replacement. Not all homeowners are this lucky.
The area's clean. There's no threat to the groundwater or any other threat that could come from TNT.
Most recovered ordnance ends up in the bunkers of the GK in Münster, Lower Saxony. This state-owned company specializes in recovering bombs and munitions. The complex is sealed off within a wide radius. Every bomb remains dangerous, even without its fuse. As a first step, its outer shell is cut up. All of the machines are remote-controlled and spark-free.
We cut it into pieces and put the individual chunks in the furnace to destroy the explosives. That's more environmentally friendly. The explosives are destroyed in the furnace, and then the flue gases are scrubbed.
Once the bomb's in place, everyone has to leave the bunker.
We've seen detonations several times. When you watch a war movie and you see people running, that's completely unrealistic. When a 100-kilo bomb blows up, you could park more than a car in that hole. That's often underestimated.
Every year, the GK dismantles and disposes of hundreds of wartime bombs and shells. Most of the processes are managed from a remote control room because of the deadly contents. The saw has to be realigned time and again. Breaking the bomb down into slices takes 8 hours.
This is the head of the bomb. That's the booster load, tetrol. And that's the TNT.
You still have to be careful here?
Of course. Munitions were made to detonate, not to be dismantled.
After that, the crumbly and highly explosive TNT is manually pushed out of the steel rings and blown up in a controlled explosion.
The explosives are placed in the furnace to be destroyed, and the rings, which still contain explosive residue, are flame cleaned and then discarded.
400 tons of munitions are destroyed in controlled explosions here every year, including poison gas shells. The regulations imposed by the authorities are very strict. The contamination of the air and water must remain minimal. the detonation chamber must be completely sealed off from the outside world.
When you have an explosion, you get waste products, the metals that get put back into the system. We also have the processing water that we clean in our own plant under supervision. And then we have residual substances that we can process in our plants, and we have flue gases that we emit under supervision too.
The core of the plant is a plasma furnace that produces temperatures of more than 1,000 degrees. It burns chemical agents. It's not just the legacies of the world wars that end up here. 500 tons of chemicals from Libya are currently being destroyed in the facility. The United Nations secured these raw materials for chemical weapons in the desert of North Africa. There are more than enough of those off the German coast too, lying on the seafloor, uncontrolled. After the Second World War, the Allied forces tipped hundreds of thousands of poison gas shells into the North Sea and the Baltic. Entire ships full of such deadly cargo were just sunk. Wolgast on the Baltic had a collection site for such bombs and shells after the war. Horst Ziegler was on the ships at the time and had to throw the explosive devices into the sea near the island of Bornholm.
The bombs contained Blue Cross chemical agents. Lung irritants were also in those barrels. It was such a mess when we had to toss them overboard. We got exposed to some of that because some of the barrels were damaged. We were completely unprotected.
His feet and legs were burned by the leaking mustard gas. He had pain for years. Today, he often has sleepless nights when he thinks back to the time when he was a forced laborer at 17.
When I see my original ID from the state-owned disposal unit, Muna Wolgast, I can't see straight. You could gas half of Germany with the amount I threw into the Baltic.
The highly toxic Zyklon B from the death camps was also simply submerged.
The train line was over there. Everything here was full of munitions. There were 5,000 or 6,000 cans of Zyklon B. The stuff that was here, it's unimaginable.
He spent 30 years writing letters to every German government, asking it to retrieve the chemical agents in the Baltic, but he only ever received rejections. The German government said it wasn't responsible outside of the 12-mile zone and the munitions were sunk by the Allies. Horst Ziegler is 87 now. He's frustrated because nobody's paying attention to the ticking time bombs on the ocean floor. When recovery is too expensive, conservationists get involved. Andreas Haufer takes care of a huge exclusion zone. The military site of Jüterborg in Brandenburg is now a nature reserve after 150 years of military use. People are only allowed to enter under supervision. The Kaiser's troops trained here with heavy artillery, and until the 1990s, the Soviets were here with their tanks. Professor Johannes Preuss is amazed by the extent of the contamination. There are leftover munitions from the First World War next to derelict bunkers. Every summer, phosphorus shells spontaneously ignite, causing major forest fires that are almost impossible to put out. Most of the terrain is too dangerous, even for the fire brigade.
This started here in 1885, and firing continued until 1992. That's a lot of explosives, but some of them didn't explode properly, and they're stuck in the ground. And then you have water that leaches explosives into the groundwater.
The state of Brandenburg has washed its hands of the problem and handed over the areas to a conservation society so that the history can be swept under a grassy carpet. The entire terrain is a nature reserve. More than half of the area got the highest conservation status possible, despite the severe contamination.
There's a long list of items that were found here, both Allied and German munitions, bombs, shells, and close combat ammunition. When the land has to be used, it's cleaned up. You have the fire protection strips in the forest, for example. They have to be cleared to allow the fire brigade to access them.
But the conservationists don't have enough money to have the entire area cleaned up.
The reason why the Conservation Society got this land for a reduced price is because the state of Brandenburg couldn't do anything else with this highly contaminated area. You need €1 for every square metre you want to clean up. We have 72 square kilometres here. So we're talking unrealistic millions you'd have to pay to comprehensively remove all munitions.
Contaminated military spots are transformed into nature reserves while people are kept away. Is that the solution? 960,000 hectares of land are and were used by the military, and all this land is full of ticking time bombs. They stay in the ground because the responsibility is shifted to private owners and to conservation societies.
The reason is simple. A lot of money's at stake. Those doing the work have to invest a lot of money. Only the state can do that.
And the state doesn't even have a central body to supervise the explosive legacy. There's a tangled mass of agencies. Sometimes it's the federal government, sometimes the states and local authorities. It'll be a long time before the poison, the bombs and the shells of the world wars have disappeared entirely from Germany.